If you were dropped into Ice Age Europe with nothing but your hands and the landscape around you, you'd probably freeze before the first night was over. But not the Neanderthals. These early humans didn't just survive those brutal winters. They thrived in them, maintaining steady warmth, cooking food, hardening tools, and even preserving hides long before the first flint and steel ever sparked. For decades, archaeologists assumed their fires were primitive, unreliable, or accidental. Then, recent research turned that belief on its head. What scientists uncovered was a method so effective, so resourcefully engineered, that even with all our modern gear, it's hard to replicate its consistency. This isn't campfire folklore. It's the fire trick that let Neanderthals live where most modern survivalists wouldn't last a week. Let's break down how it worked, why it was banned or forgotten after the agricultural revolution, and how you can apply the same principles to make a fire that stays alive through wind, rain, and freezing nights, all without matches or lighters. The Neanderthal didn't just make fire, he mastered its chemistry. The first key to understanding the Neanderthal fire trick lies in what archaeologists found at ancient hearth sites across France and the Iberian Peninsula. Layered ash deposits surrounded by hardened clay revealed something fascinating. These fires were controlled. They burned long, clean, and at consistent temperatures. That doesn't happen by accident. The secret was their use of manganese dioxide. While most early humans relied solely on flint sparks and dried tinder, Neanderthals ground down a soft black mineral found in nearby caves, manganese ore, and mixed it with powdered charcoal. This wasn't for decoration or pigment, as once thought. Experiments have shown that when manganese dioxide is added to charcoal, it lowers the ignition temperature of wood by nearly 100 degrees Celsius. In other words, it made fires start easier, burn hotter, and stay lit longer with less fuel. This was their hidden advantage. They effectively hacked the chemistry of combustion. You know, modern survival gear, things like ferro rods, magnesium blocks and chemical fire starters, tries to replicate that same principle. Yet, some 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals were already using a natural catalyst that achieved the same results without any manufactured tools. To apply this today, you don't need ancient minerals. The concept is what matters. Alter the ignition environment, not just the spark. By mixing a fine oxygen-rich powder like crushed charcoal or ash into your tinder base, you increase surface area and promote faster ignition. That's the Neanderthal principle in action, engineering fire at the material level. Most of us today think of fire in 3 stages: tinder kindling and fuel wood. Neanderthals worked differently. They built sealed core fires, a technique rediscovered only in recent years by experimental archaeologists. Instead of lighting the top or side of a pile, they began by creating a small, hollow pit, filling it with crushed bone bark and damp wood, and covering it with a thin layer of charcoal and ash before igniting. Once lit, the fire burned from the inside out. The outer shell of damp wood acted as insulation, while the inner core stayed hot and oxygen-starved, slowly smouldering instead of burning away. The result was a semi-contained ember bed that could last for hours or even days, ready to burst back into flame with just a breath of air. This is where the Outperforms modern gear claim truly earns its weight. A modern survival fire starter might get a flame going fast, but it won't maintain a stable heat source without constant feeding. The Neanderthal sealed core fire, however, worked like a primitive thermal battery. It stored energy in embers and released it gradually. You can replicate this technique easily in the field. Start by digging a shallow pit and lining it with damp clay or stone. Place your tinder and charcoal at the bottom, add small wood on top, and lightly cover the structure with bark or damp leaves before lighting. Once burning, seal part of it with soil or ash. The interior will smoulder even through wind and rain, and you can revive it by exposing a corner to air. This is the same principle the Neanderthals used to maintain warmth overnight without constant tending. Now, one of the other astonishing discoveries about Neanderthal fires is actually the kind of fuel they preferred. Excavations at places like Pêche de la Zay in France, for example, have revealed calcined bone fragments, and sometimes in truly massive quantities. These weren't just waste, they were fuel. You see, bone burns hot and slow, and thanks to its porous interior, it can retain heat far longer than wood. And when mixed with animal fat, it becomes a sort of natural candle, smokeless, waterproof, and self-sustaining. Quite ingenious, really. Even today, modern outdoor enthusiasts often struggle with wet or scarce wood. But Neanderthals, well, they solved that by simply using what was always available: bone. When bone is dried and crushed, it actually ignites quite easily with charcoal embers, and it can sustain a flame even in damp conditions. Fat was their accelerant, applied in small amounts to produce a steady radiant heat that wouldn't be extinguished, even in the wind. Rather clever, don't you think? Now, if you want to try this technique safely today, it's best to start small. Mix rendered animal fat, like tallow or lard, with dry sawdust or charcoal dust, and press it into small cakes. These ignite quickly, and honestly, they burn longer than synthetic firelighters. It's the very same principle Neanderthals used: organic energy stored in a compact, reliable form. This wasn't a crude guesswork method. It was the result of thousands of years of observation and adaptation to the coldest climates Earth has seen. It was survival reduced to its most efficient science. Modern survival often focuses on ignition, how fast you can get a flame. But Neanderthal firecraft was about continuity. They didn't waste energy starting new fires daily. They built hearths designed to retain embers for reuse, passing them from camp to camp, even carrying them inside carved antler containers lined with clay. Archaeological evidence shows traces of soot and charred fibre inside these fire carriers, suggesting they transported live coals over distance instead of making new sparks each time. You can apply this same thinking by maintaining a steady ember bed during camping trips rather than extinguishing fires completely each night. Cover coals with a layer of ash to suffocate oxygen but retain heat. In the morning, blow gently into the ash bed. It'll revive almost instantly. This reduces resource use, preserves matches or ferro rods, and mirrors the sustainable rhythm Neanderthals lived by. The Neanderthal fire trick isn't just about lighting flames. It's about a mindset that valued consistency, efficiency, and respect for natural chemistry. They weren't primitive. They were pragmatic engineers of their environment, using every available material to overcome nature's coldest challenges. Even today, their principles outlast our gadgets. A sealed core fire lasts through storms. Bone and fat fuel can sustain warmth in soaked forests. Charcoal, mixed with fine powder, ignites with minimal spark. Every lesson is a tool we can still use, especially when modern gear fails or conditions turn harsh. So, next time you head out into the wild, remember this. The best fire kit might not come from a store. It might come from the hands of a Neanderthal 50,000 years ago who learned that real mastery isn't about conquering nature. It's about cooperating with it. If you found this deep dive into prehistoric firecraft valuable, make sure to subscribe to Echoes of Valor, share it with your fellow history enthusiasts, and stay tuned for more forgotten survival wisdom that still outperforms modern technology. The past still burns bright. You just have to know how to tend it.